In our previous webinar, we discussed the most basic of natural building materials, mud, and how to use it in the present day scenario. We will be talking about other materials in our forthcoming webinars. Today we bring you some of the common traditional construction techniques used for constructing, especially with natural materials, by several architects, common man, and builders of what we call as handmade architecture across the globe. Working with hands on materials gives a very deep understanding of the materials and greatly enhances the design perspectives of designers. The most important question of most of the people would be is how relevant is it in today's scenario? Is it possible to build in this way today in the age of rapid urbanization? We are here today to find out the answers to this question in our simple Talks 13 on traditional construction techniques. Welcome to all of you once again. We have today architect Varun Thautam presenting his works and that of his guru Amil Kadik and architect Sundari. A hearty welcome to you, Varun, Sundari, and Amil, if he's listening. To moderate today's session, we have Professor Anand from College of Architecture, Trivandrum. He's an advisory member of CGBMT and the professor and design chair at College of Architecture, Trivandrum. He is a senior architect with a strong lineage to project management and development consulting. Having graduated from Government College of Architecture, Lucknow, he went on to lead several design studios, several large design project teams also in India and abroad. Currently, he mentors a design studio at Trivandrum. Architect Anand is a fellow of the Indian Institute of Architects and a professional member of the Royal Institution of Chartered Surveyors, UK. Welcome to the session, Anand, and over to you.
Thank you, Neelam. It's always a pleasure to be in the webinar talks, where we get an opportunity to meet some of the industry leaders and some of the industry movers who move a lot of areas of our profession. Our first speaker is architect Varun Thautam. He graduated from Indian Institute of Technology, Roorkee, in his architecture and did his master's in urban design and housing at McGill University in Canada. And then he moved on to Bangalore, where he established his studio. For him, using earth is a deeply spiritual process with no distinction between art and work and meditation and education. He looks and he loves traveling, learning, building, and teaching. He has been exploring an approach where it might be possible to abstract the essential lessons of the preserved traditional culture of the local context. His learning and synthesizing for his ways of the building in such a manner that are genuine, fresh, and sustainable in design is achieved. He believes that in this approach, he makes a unique, comfortable, and cost-effective environment that are in tune with the rhythm, shapes, process, and cycles of nature. He has won a lot of accolades and recognition. He's won the second award in the Global Architecture Design Award in 2019. He was a finalist for the Completed Buildings and Civic and Community category on the World Architecture Festival 2019. He won the Build Architecture Award last year on the Design Build firm from Bangalore. He also won the Young Designers Award in Architecture on the Indian Architect and Builder magazine, not to mention his Maureen Anderson Prize in Architecture in Canada, the Provost Graduate Fellowship, and Louis B. McGill Graduate Fellowship at McGill University, his Canadian Center for Architecture, the Charrette that he participates, and he has a lot of research and publications to his credit. After Varun's presentation and talk, he would also speak about our third speaker, Amil Kadik, because he had worked with him. Amil Kadik is a master builder, a master craftsman, and a healer from Bosnia who works in natural plasters and finishes for the last 16 years. He has conducted several workshops and projects worldwide and has more than 120 Tadalek projects in his fame. He masters all types of construction, including cob, wattle and dot, earth and lime, rammed earth, and many more traditional techniques. Currently, he's based in Mexico. To make things easy for all of us to understand, I had put forth certain queries for Varun, and Varun will put all these questions that I have put forth into a presentation which he will share as soon as I finish with my questions. Varun, some questions that I had asked was, are the modern construction and traditional constructions different in techniques, or are they similar? Can we get some sight into it? The second question we addressed to him was, is traditional construction technique adaptable in today's construction industry or in today's system of requirements? The third thing we asked him was, does it get integrated along with the finishes and the techniques which we see in the modern buildings and various kinds of buildings? And the last part that I wanted to emphasize him to do was his several years of experience of doing workshops and projects. We wanted him to come back and say that all these techniques are possible even in today's construction, and how he can build the walls, the arches, the domes, and adaptations to look like a modern building. So that's where we want to hear. So over to Varun. There we are. We'll have your sheen get squared and you can share it and we'll all listen to you patiently.
Thank you very much, Anand sir. Thank you, CGBMT, for this beautiful opportunity. And I'm so excited to be in front of so many people in taking your precious time. And let me just begin by answering straight away the first question, pointing out the distinction between life and buildings in a vernacular setting as compared to the modern settings where we are currently inhabiting. So over my years, I've tried to note down these distinctions and I put them down into a golden book. As of now, the distinctions are clearly 10 in number. So I will quickly talk about these 10 distinctions. The first one is that, see, predominantly life in the vernacular settings is having a lot of time for various activities. That there is tilling, there is sowing, harvesting, animal rearing, house building, cultivating, herds, working with social life. So there is a lot of time that is included, which means that everybody is multi-skilled and can do a lot of things at the same time. It is not a very specific and a focused education and learning that we modern beings have. They are very wholesome, and without this formal education, they are much more educated than all of us, because they have the skills, the talent, the know-how, and more importantly, the time to do everything. Right? The second point I've seen is that vernacular buildings are predominantly low investment with a very high maintenance. They build it in a very short span of time with very locally available resources, and they also are working together to do this building work. So the amount of time and energy and resources it takes to actually build a house is very small. But as compared to the lifespan of the building, that is extended because of its high maintenance, and they have cycles of a serious maintenance happening once in 10 years, a maintenance cycle happening every year, and there are also monthly and seasonal as well as weekly maintenance activities. Some houses or most houses also have a daily maintenance activities. It can be as simple as putting water in front of the main door and doing a rangoli, or doing a cow dung finish. So there is time for that maintenance, and buildings are therefore distinguished between the modern ones and the traditional ones, is that the traditional ones have a high level of maintainability. That is the term I use. Whereas the modern buildings do not have a high end of maintainability. Very clear distinction is that if you take a mud pot or a ceramic pot, the Japanese have a technique where if a pot breaks, it can be put together and still used, and the value of the broken pot is even more than the original mud pot because they put it together with metals and gold and not. Whereas the modern building is like this plastic bottle, no? That once you have a hole in it, it just has to be disposed. It cannot be used because it does not have this term maintainability. That is the same thing with modern buildings, that we have a very high investment and very little maintenance. The third point is that in this traditional vernacular setting, your community, your family, your relations, your contacts, and your connection with the environment is much more important than mere money. Whereas in the modern settings, it is all about money. Every transaction is about money. You do not have any contact with the masons, with the artisans, with the people, with the resources, with the objects. It is all a simple transaction. So this is a very important distinction that sets these both very, very much apart. And this mere paper transaction that our buildings have become, or the spaces have become, where everything is just a simple price tag, it makes the whole perspective, the landscape that we live in, very shallow, very materialistic, and very conditional upon gaining more money in this modern world. And as you invest in your time in gaining more money, all the others that the vernacular, other aspects that the vernacular architecture have, that is the community, your relation, they take a back seat. And in fact, in modern life, we have a drive to earn more money at the cost of community, at the cost of community and relationships, at the cost of nature, and the cost of your own built environment. Point number 4. Point number 4 is that I've seen that in vernacular buildings or in villages, are spending most of their time in the outside, in the open, in the veranda, in the courtyard, in the patio, in the field. There is more amount, the sunlight is used to the maximum extent. The day starts at 4 a.m., 3 a.m., and they utilize the early morning hours to the most extent. Whereas here, most of our time in modern buildings is spent indoors. And because of this, there's a very clear distinction in the way we also design buildings. Of course, there are certain trades like weaving, or sometimes even pottery, that happens indoors. And they are existent in this vernacular setting. But again, the building very clearly responds to that kind of a lifestyle. So, in summary, to point number 4, that yes, we somehow have locked ourselves indoors and we have made ourselves, have very less contact or opportunities of contact with the society, with the community, or even with the family, with the environment, and all of that. So, as we lock ourselves indoors, and because of the lack of the connection with all these people, life becomes very individualistic. Even the opportunity of exploring a connection has been reduced drastically as we have constantly moved indoors. point number 5 is that in vernacular architecture around the world, when I cut a cross section of what is the function of a building, I see that it is brought down to very simple points. Shelter from rain, heat, or cold, or the climate. Shelter from, animals and any disasters in general. There's a very minimal amount of privacy. The word privacy is a very modern concept. Witold Rybinski, in his very famous book Home, writes about how this word privacy is actually a 15th century a word itself. The word privacy did not exist before. You have also the safety of some very minimal possessions that is there in your vernacular buildings. So we had shelter, minimum privacy, and safety and storage of certain possessions. In comparison, our modern buildings is not about these basic things. It starts from status. It starts from image. So in the Maslow's triangle, our modern buildings are very much focused on the top triangle, the look and the feel of it, right? Whereas the bottommost triangle is represented in your vernacular buildings. So it is all the self-actualization needs come from these modern buildings. And it is very strange that we have walked away just from that basic needs. So when we are doing that, we unnecessarily put in more money and more effort that the building is doing a kind of a gratifying, satisfying purpose to you. And you put in more money to basically make your building look good, feel good. And that looking and feeling is also just in the mind. It is a perspective that we have wrongly invested in. I would rather say it has been marketed that way, such that you become a slave to this looking and feeling. This perspective has been fed to you over more than 2 or 3 generations now. Now, looking at point number 5 or 6, the vernacular building has a plenty of space. It is one single room, which gives you a diversity of feelings. There is a hot corner, a cold corner. I talk about this in my in the lectures that I give on bioclimatic design at universities. Compare the vernacular building as a single box, a single unit that is dark, but gives a diversity of feelings within a single space. There are not many divisions within that room. It is all a single family space in general, right? And that is why space is plentiful. There is very little furniture. And if you want a certain kind of feeling, you go towards the hot corner, towards the stove. If you want something to feel colder, you go towards water that is kept, or towards the northeastern corner. So there is a diversity of experiences created within a single space in vernacular buildings. Whereas modern buildings, we are trying to create units, diverse cubes, which give you different experiences. So we have created a cube called the kitchen, a cube called the bathroom, a cube called the bedroom, a cube called the living, dining. Each one has its own diverse conditions, and you use that only for 5 or 10, 15 minutes, and then you go somewhere else and you are moving between these cubes. And each cube has a certain design aspect and a perspective, right? So we have become individual units, so that the social space of what a home was is not there. In the history of interior design, there's a very beautiful book that in Gaston Blanchard talks about this in The Spear and the Labyrinth. There is even Christopher Alexander talks about it in his book, The Timeless Way of Building. It is written also in the 5,000 years of domestic architecture. There's the book 5,000 Years of the Home. So you have all these aspects, how our home has broken from this single cube into small stratified individualistic pieces. Because we are in these individualistic pieces, we still want that space, and our house has been growing larger and larger. It is not uncommon to have 15, 16, 2,000 square foot houses, which is doing the same amount of function that a 300 square foot vernacular building is doing, right? So for me, the learning comes that, we really have increased the size of the house itself 4 or 5-fold over the last 3 generations. And it has become almost impossible for the city to sustain such a life. It has become impossible for individuals to actually own or stay in a home, because we have to invest 5 or 10 times previously, which was not the case. So John Jandai talks about this, that a rat makes a hole within 2 or 3 days. A bird makes a nest within a week. And why do we human beings need a 30-year mortgage or a loan to own a home? Which is ridiculous. And how are we civilized? Is what he says. So this whole question that why have we gone this far away from the vernacular is just leading to the answer that there is a possibility of actually building cost-effective houses if we look at it from the perspective of a vernacular house and not as a modern design, which is very rarely taught in architecture colleges. In fact, standards and anthropometry and Western ideas are fed into our students all the time. Point number 6 is that space around the vernacular house is plentiful. The garden provides, the landscape provides for the food, for the water, for the fresh air. And you have a trust and ownership on that space. A community ownership on a space around a house exists even today. There are rules of understanding. There are rules of maintenance, and there are rules of sharing those resources with everybody. Here, we have no space, very little space. And even the space that exists has been walled, barriered, and appropriated by human beings alone, taking away the space from nature. We have created rules called setbacks, which have appropriated buildings just for ourselves. So that space that is there in vernacular architecture gives them a lot of resilience, because when they are able to very easily grow what they need, they can get fresh water and they can live healthier lives. It takes actually less amount of time to maintain that than to invest in money, get money, buy space, and live in a cramped society that we are in our cities. Thanks to that waste, the large amount of space, my point number 7 comes is that we have more area for waste disposal, and there is very little waste at all. In fact, in the vernacular precinct, when I see whether it is in Mexico or Canada or just whole of Latin America, India, that I've seen, is that there is no waste. Why? That is because the landscape itself is providing for water and food. In our case, because the landscape is not providing for the water and food, food has to be packaged and transported from a larger distance that will support a city. That packaging and transporting has now created the problem of waste. Now the question of disposal of waste is a new one, isn't it? Which does not exist in the vernacular building. You just in the villages, they go with a basket, like a simple basket like this. We also go with these kind of baskets or a bag to shop, and we buy whatever vegetables, and we put the vegetables in a basket itself in the kitchen. There is no need of the refrigerator, and that is the kind of life. Water is bought in a pot. There is no wastage. And here we have to travel, we have to invest in the transportation of goods, we have to invest in roads and infrastructure for that transportation. Then we have to invest in a waste disposal system called the sanitary system that we talk about, where fresh water is immediately turned into black water, which needs a lot of energy and resources to convert back into usable water of any sort. And we are polluting the whole system. It is a big chain reaction just because we are disconnected with this environment. So what can we do is that, again, this is when you look from the perspective of the vernacular, something different can happen. And finally, I'm talking about 2 points. That is, there is definitely a very clear climatic response from the vernacular settings. That there is a lot of thought. Aldous Huxley said that the second best alternative to talent is tradition. So they follow a tradition because the requirement for talent is not there. It just comes down from many generations, and they have these solutions over a long period of time. Coming to the point number 10 is that proximity is not a concern in the vernacular settings. Everything is close by, everything is in walking distance, because the size of the settlement is exactly designed or grown to that proximity. And in that, there are smaller sub-settlements, smaller chawls, smaller mohallas and whatnot, where everything is there within that walking distance, right? And man is actually connected now to this land. So because of this, all these hazards, that is fire hazard, waste disposal, sanitation, air and noise pollution, all of this is not as much as a risk or a hazard that has to be dealt with. Also, people have time and energy, and these are all kind of linking us. How is it that we have been educated, are continuing to educate our kids in this modern setting, towards a modern direction, in the straight line that has gone on for the last 3 generations, where our intent should be to teach perspectives, teach children a way of looking, expose them to this way of life that is real. What we are living is a very unrealistic model which cannot last. And that is why, we have these webinars, and thanks to Anand Sir and ma'am here, Neelam ma'am, we are having this kind of a webinar to just highlight these. So I will pause here, and I would like to now go to the question number 2 and 3, where I can talk about a few of my experiences and clarify these diversities of how I'm applying these ideas in actual design and the building of spaces for my clients, right? Let me share my screen. I'm just asking if everyone is if I am audible, and it is clear so far.
Yes, you're audible. Yes.
I'm sharing my screen. I think I'm sharing it. All right. So there is a So I'm going to start with some of my questions that I'm trying to. So this is going to be the next 25 to 30 minutes where I'm going to show you all these photos and talk about these questions. My first question was what we have been going on all this for 15 minutes is that should we be looking at tradition or innovation? And what is it that we should be actually focusing on in life? So obviously I'm very closely inclined towards the idea of using tradition. I'm very, let me see why the images are not loading. 1 second. Yes. So just traveling. That this is a simple house near Chiapas in Mexico that I saw. A very simple subtropical kind of a climate, very similar to us. And that is a simple single house that they have. And you can see that there are not many windows. It is all dark on the inside. On the inside, it is like this simple wattle and daub kind of construction. You can see how minimum their life really is. And how easily that the whole village or the whole town is composed of these small simple boxes. I'm surprised this slideshow is pausing. Yes. So a lot more people are living in these kind of small box kind of a settlement, and there are a lot of these social spaces that are created in this very beautiful village of small boxes, of individual houses, and each house is having all these beautiful functions. So these are some very picturesque settings, which we now die to live for, and we would pay so much money to go and live in a resort like this. So these are built out of mud, adobe buildings with mud mortar, simple wooden roofs, and they have simple clay tiles, and they are more than 100 years old and have been passed on from many generations. Are the images visible, my friends?
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Hello? You can see there are a lot of small auxiliary structures which are equally important, where you have the storage of wood, a small oven, and you can see building materials are all scattered, because that is your maintenance. You have a few tiles that sometimes a monkey can come and just lift off, or a tile just breaks during the rains, and you can just replace them. So it is a part of this life, that the replacing of tiles, and even the child or the father or the grandfather or the grandmother is equipped to go up there and change the tile when required. It is common knowledge. It's as common as how we just go out and hang our towel after a shower in the balcony. You can see the ladders to the left there, which are used to climb up on the roof and maintain the roof. That is the evidence of the claim that I'm trying to make. This is again on the way to the Yucatan Peninsula, some wattle and daub houses with mud. And you can see this very, very basic kind of a structure. It's so beautiful that they are able to modify the structure whenever they want. It takes very little time to extend a house, shorten a house, or even move a house. So in this, in Sierra Gorda, in Querétaro, I witnessed this idea of moving a house, where the village comes together, the village elders come together, they bless a person, they give them a new site, just because there was a flood or something has happened. A person is allowed to move their house. So the posts are all dismantled, everything is just dismantled, the roof is dismantled, everything is moved to another place, and within a few days a new house can be assembled. So it is so easy. In terms of their capital investment is almost close to zero. It is only an investment of time. Also, you can see how in these traditional buildings they are able to modify these buildings very easily. They kind of support it, and they are able to maintain it over a very long period of time. Simple stacking of bricks, simple readjusting of boards. Sometimes they are even using the modern building materials in conjunction with these vernacular buildings. It can be as simple as using concrete PCC, whatever, a band, or an electrical, fitting with a meter board, or sometimes even a concrete floor. And you can see this retrofitting happening all the time in these villages. But the lifestyle largely still remains the same. It is basically changing very quickly. It is changing all across the globe, and very few pockets are preserved. But you do see these settings. Now to my next point very quickly is the question of, just hold with me. I'm going to skip a lot of these and go to my next question. Sorry, just a second. And the second question would be, should we talk about rational or intuitive design? Now, I've been questioning myself about the rational method of design that has been taught to us, right? And I kind of felt that is not for buildings that I can freely connect to. That that creativity that I had a child, just a second, I have to mute myself. A second. Please hold. All right. Sorry for that. So we were very creative as children, and we drew houses the way we wanted to. We drew landscapes the way we wanted to. And our whole education system has brought us into a very rational, controlled way where we are using the head and not the heart in designing. And in vernacular buildings, I've seen that the women, the children are still involved in the drawing, in the painting, and the maintaining of the houses. And the hand goes well with the mud and lime and stone, and they are able to create forms. And I started looking more, diverse, basically moving away from this rational way of thought and looking at more organic, heartfelt, intuitive design, where I can use just the hand, just the imagination, just drawings and sight and the materials, the people around me to bring out something very unexpected. Okay, it is not something that is pre-thought out so much. It evolves on site. And in fact, building is that. It is not a product, but it is a process that takes a very long time. It takes a lifetime to create a building, and the building responds to your needs, and you respond to the building's needs. It is kind of a marriage. And it is not like this product that, yes, someone has given it to you and you are forced to live with it. You cannot change it, you cannot enlarge it, and so on. So this slow method of building is very important. So this only comes through your intuitive way of designing, intuitive way of thinking about a building. It does not take an architectural education. It does not take engineering knowledge. It takes a connection with buildings, with building material, with the landscape, and with the people, with the artisans around you to create buildings. Architectural education is not the solution because it will teach you a lot of rational thought. So these are some of these very intuitively created works, and not, it is not, obviously, it is not my work. It is the work of a whole community of artisans, of children, of the client. Everybody is just working together, and it has grown over the few years. The eco-san toilets, ecological sanitation, use of waste. And this is the intuitiveness that I am talking about. It is, so I don't want to do innovation technologically. There is an innovation that can happen through intuition. And that is what we should be focusing our thoughts, our education on, if we are indeed trying to create innovative or new buildings, right? Now, one example is with students, we just did a small exercise where we would try to create a simple grain silo. And the objective was to build within 3 days a small grain silo with only what was available in a landscape around the site. So all the students, we bought the rocks, we bought some mud, and we put together this very basic stone and mud wall. And then we slowly started looking at logs, cut the logs. We found some adobe blocks from a demolished building. We brought them in and we created this grain silo within 3 days. So it just goes to prove how vernacular, and to try with these modern students, what is it that our human hands can just do, and what is the power of it? That if we are living in a landscape within 3 days with almost zero money, living in a place, we are able to create this structure. Cuckoo School, done in 2014, was very similar to this idea, where, in the process of building, we created a family. because we shared the food, we shared the water, we shared the space. It was a lot of love that went into this making of building. Here's some, again, intuitive work with natural plasters in Canada, where we are just using, even in a very cold climate, straw bale and mud. You know, there is sometimes the use of a modern, element within this. For example, in Mexico, this this is a laterite quarry in Mexico, where we use this, these laterite blocks, cut them, and we created a very interesting kind of a building with, which is an assembly of these laterite blocks. And I saw them in the vernacular buildings, how they've used so many different types of bricks from other buildings, mortar from somewhere, laterite and stone, and the wall is a combination of all of it, because they just built with what was available. Then a modern building came in out of this design, where we tried and did something with this cut laterite blocks. And it is, this is the use of the same with, a reinterpretation, where I'm trying to use that rusticness of that of that laterite to create this kind of, laterite is basically some kind of a stone, a soft stone which hardens over time. You see, so this is the building that was created in Mexico. Again, here in a house here in Bangalore, this is Siddhapa's residence. We used the mud from a site close by, and we created blocks on the site, and by just drying the mud. And how did we had to block the road and make these mud blocks on the road, dry them. It is in Amrutahalli in Bangalore, and then use those mud blocks to create this kind of a structure. You see, I have married it with a RCC frame, kind of a reinforced concrete building, which is the bones, but the flesh and the skin is of mud, predominantly of mud. So there are restrictions in an urban setting to create a building like this, but this is the residence today, right? And these are the spaces inside. This is a photo by Akira Venkat, a very nice photographer that I'm very thankful to. These are the landscape spaces. This is Professor Siddhapa in his house, modern house today. Okay. There are issues. There are a lot of problems, waterproofing problems that we've been trying to solve, and I can get to them in my questions. All right. Again, in Mexico, this project where we created, a courtyard house with some water, and tried to create this sense of a single enclosure again, by just creating very few intermediate walls, and create a very large kind of an interconnected space was the central idea. The use of lime, the use of oxides, that's an oxide flow that we have Sundari talking about. This is lime oxides on the walls. And there is a very soft handmade touch to this kind of a modern building. My own parents' house was built out of rammed earth, and in 2008, these are the rammed earth walls that we used again as infill walls in a concrete frame building. This is my parents' house. Krishna's residence, the DCP Prabhakar, his house was also built with rammed earth and stone in this way. Very rudiment methods. Use of a door frame to compact earth and create these walls, and those walls become this space like this, which is again a single enclosure. All these points that I'm trying to talk about, try to create more openness, unifiedness in a single space, create more, less stratified, spaces where everything is actually interconnected. Okay. Now, my third question, should we be building plastic or non-plastic? And I would say that it is better. What I mean by plastic or non-plastic, it is not this plastic that I'm talking about, the plastic arts. A plastic object is something that is moldable, that is malleable, that you can just very easily modify with your own body or with a very few tools. A non-plastic element is usually very rigid and hard, cannot be easily modified. So the difference between plastic and non-plastic is that with the plastic elements, that is mud, you are able to very easily create objects at a very low cost. It requires very little skill. It requires very few tools. So this is a workshop with my students in university in Mexico, where we are just understanding how with these plastic methods, that is just the use of mud and adobe, we are able to create spaces, experiment with walls, build arches with these plastic materials. Non-plastic materials require a lot of skill. They require tools to cut and form. They require questions of accuracy, which are very painful, which are very troublesome, because it requires a special rational education to use these non-plastic elements. There is some background noise in the behind which is kind of troubling me. Can you please mute yourself? So these are some, plastic elements, some structures which are very malleable that we try to create. That is Professor Garduño, who came. These are all university projects where we are trying to, inculcate students with these ideas of using these plastic, works. So with that, the modifications of buildings becomes easy, because you don't have too much effort, you don't need too much skill. Anybody can modify the buildings. So the participation in building maintenance becomes universal. It does not require skill. It is not gender or sex specific. It is not age specific. It is not ability specific. Anybody can practice. But as soon as you start using non-plastic elements, it requires a machine, it requires a tool, it requires a proper timing, a proper calculation, a proper method to assemble. And therefore, you are now removing this opportunity for diversity in participation in building construction. So for me, this has become a big revelation, because just by using plastic methods, I'm able to include larger parts of society, women and children, old and young, male and female, across the landscape, across settings, beyond the barriers of language. We can include them in the building process. And that is what led to all these workshops in the last 5 or 6 years, with a diversity of buildings, where we created several complex forms for normal people. But it is this plasticity of the material that has allowed us, that so many people, more than 500 people, have participated in the workshops and built vaults and domes with us. And several masons and artisans have been able to participate in it. So these are simple, very simple structures built out of mud. Again, the same idea, no? Soaking mud and making blocks on site and using the same blocks, involving the local brick makers who just create these modern bricks, trying to get them to make adobe bricks. That is Jeremy from Made in Earth, Vanessa in the background, very close friends of mine, participating in the workshop. This is the final building, which is built in Tirutani, and it still stands in the very beautiful landscape around Tirutani. Okay. So now I will come to the last 3 questions that were there. So it's taking a little time to load because the images are heavy. That's the building. Okay. So coming to the last 3 questions was, should we build stronger or weaker? Now this is a very tricky kind of a question, because everybody is, the modern architecture has been trying to train us to build stronger buildings. Mm-hmm. So it is a very common knowledge that anything that is very strong can crack, whereas something that is weak will bend. And that is what decides the life of a building. In our intent to build stronger, rigid buildings, a single shake of the earth has created havoc. We've had, earthquakes. And this project was the reconstruction of a school near Tequisquiapan in Mexico, where school children were involved in building their own roof after the earthquake. So what we try to do is that, because in this earthquake prone region, which is a very reality, you know, for example, you look at Japanese architecture, they make things that are very flexible, that are very movable. And it is not just earthquakes that move a building, you know, the building is always in motion. There is vibrations because of a truck or a lorry or a train moving close by, vibrations caused because of the sound waves of an airplane, sound, vibrations by loud music. When there is expansion and contraction in buildings just because of the extremes of thermal variances that we are getting. There is also the change caused because of the expansion of materials, because of unexpected rains. So building is constantly moving and modifying, and more rigid your building is, more risky it is, because it will crack. If it is soft and malleable, it will bend, it will mold. There's a lot of background noise, guys. So please mute yourselves. So this project, you know, where the school children, poor school children were learning how to build their own roof and rebuild it whenever an earthquake happens. So now our approach is not to give a product. Really, it isn't. I don't have to go to a site and give them a product. I just have to teach people within a day or two with the simple methods. They will pick it up, how to build their own roof. It can be as complex as a wall, but it is actually very simple. And what I've discovered from reading Christopher Alexander or my own practice is that all these weaker plastic methods are actually very intuitive. And it does not take any learning. It just takes a rediscovery because it is already there inside us. We very easily learn and connect with these things. The more rational and rigid things are very, very hard to master. Please mute yourself. So here we have school children again, no, trying to work with these, you know, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds working together to build these walls and domes. Again, you know, very quickly bringing buildings up at a pace just with mud and stone, and you know, within a day or two we can raise these buildings up. You can see this is again a plastic building. Does not mean that it is weak. It is very strong, but it will take these frequent variations from the outside. It will just bend, but it will not crack. So these are the methods. You know, this is brick tile laying in arches. This is my whole team who have, you know, all the artisans who have grown with us. There's Maestro Andres Flores, who I'll be talking quickly, Maestro James, and this is the whole team right here, my beloved family that we worked together for the last 4 years in Mexico and building several projects. This is Maestro Andres teaching us how to, you know, use you know, on a template, trying to learn how to build these vaults and domes. Initial attempts in 2014, 2013, where we are trying to, you know, learn these techniques. So this, for example, is just a block placed on a wall stuck with mud. And the capillary capacity of mud is so strong that a person can just stand on that block within a couple of hours. It is just mud stuck to a wall. These are your arches and domes. So all of these are, again, ideas of how we are building with weaker materials. Now let me get to my last 2 points because we are running short of time. Low cost of high quality. Very clearly, please go, you know, for the low cost, because the high quality is basically something that you are investing in to make it stronger, rigid, non-plastic, rational, and innovative. So it does not necessarily mean that it is good sense. Low cost is always common sense. So, for example, here in this very nice structure for Raul Makasaga, we created a small children's center, a community center and we have been trying to build with these vaults and domes, very large, up to 7 or 8 meters in span. We built some very large vaults and domes, and it is very cost effective because we are just using bricks and mud, and there is not a lot of complexity here. So low cost comes with two very specific riders. One is that the minimum number of assemblies that you use in a building, the more cost effective it is. Our building is an assembly of so many different components. There are so many. When you make the Excel spreadsheet of what a building will include, it will go into a few pages. But whereas these buildings that I've created here, for example, this building is simple stone and brick masonry, just two elements trying to create a whole building. All right. There is some windows and formworks which can be removed later, but in general, it is just that. So few assemblies means more cost effective because it is faster. It is the whole thing that engulf a single space, and it is easy to create. So this is what we have tried to, create. And the diversity has come mainly with the diversity within the building material, an extra fired brick or a bent brick or a large or a small size brick. You can see how there are many people working on this single big dome that is right here in the middle. That is the closing of that dome with simple bricks. That is the structure in that landscape. Very gently setting. Each dome there is more than 14 tons in the air, stuck with just mud mortar. These photos are repeating, but yes, that is how we close the dome. They're not in sequence. That's how we are closing the dome. And let me show. This is the final product. When we look up, we have 1,400 bricks in the air above you, about 21 tons, and it just feels very light. It's like a balloon. Yes, this is low-cost architecture. Very low-cost. Because you have used minimum number of assemblies, because it is intuition that is creating this. Very few materials. Now, that's a building from the outside. Okay. Now coming to community or the individual. The best buildings come out from a community of people working together, from a community of artisans. It is very personal in this approach. Individualistic approaches for buildings are very rare and very difficult to achieve. The community is not just in working together, but also in the idea that you are exchanging information with people, exchanging information from several generations. Because I'm not able to do that in these modern buildings, too much background noise. Yeah. So, because I'm not able to do that in these modern settings, we have made the whole process of building itself as an integration of people through workshops, that people can sign up for a volunteering opportunity or for a building opportunity, and we can spend a few days together to achieve something. And we have done several workshops in every single project where there has been an exchange of information from the local artisans. We empower the local artisans to teach, and we try and do from mock-up models to real models. And it is a very, interesting kind of a process. This is, for example, a rammed earth workshop where we have created, some very, very nice walls of very high quality with a simple workshop setting. So how do we create this community? And this community comes mainly by open sharing of lessons learned in building. As long, because the whole natural building scene, all of us natural builders are trying to work individually and keep information to ourselves. Maestro Andres says this, no, that the air that we breathe has to come out, the water that we drink has to come out, the food that we eat has to come out. Same thing goes for knowledge. We are not containers of knowledge, but we are pipes. We are a conductor of knowledge. And the more you conduct knowledge, the more the pipe or your capacity to conduct becomes, and therefore more knowledge passes through you. What you learn, you have to transmit. That is Maestro Andres' words. My own artisan, dyslexic artisan, vault and dome builder in Mexico, who is not educated in the formal system. But look at the deep wisdom that he carries. It's very powerful. And how he, with just these few words, can transform a person and transform a method that yes, it is not about, it is not the number of patents that you have. It is not the number of secrets that you keep, but it is the number of people that you share with, or the number of people you learn from. So all this integration of artisans, sorry about that. Yes, integration of artisans, integration of local masons is what creates that building. We have to create a community with them. We have to be very close to them, is what I'm trying to talk about. Here are some other buildings. And finally, I'm going to talk about, so this is this Cuckoo School, where that was the transformation point in my life, thanks to Cuckoo School, where that community idea of building became so much more powerful, because what we built was not a building. What we built was a family. And it is very beautiful to imagine that the process of building itself is more valuable because we are creating a family in the process, isn't it? We are creating connections that last much longer than the building. That is much more valuable than the building itself. It is a mere object. It's a mere building that will last 15, 20, 30, 40, or 100 years. But these connections that we've created, the moments that have touched us, will carry on for several generations. That is Cuckoo School and the whole idea of Cuckoo School. In this Casa Naumin, which won several recognitions from around the world, it was a 14-day workshop where 20 people came together, and we built this small workshop together. Sensei Amil participated in this workshop. I'm coming to Amil very soon. But what Amil taught me through his several workshops is this change, this flip of my own mind, where the value and the relationship between a master and an apprentice just comes out. It's very emotional when you just connect with a master who knows so much, who's so spiritual, who can read your body, who can read your mind, and he can tell you what to do, he or she. So this is Amil right there on those workshops. So Amil Kadik is right there, and this is the whole group of people which we together built this vault and dome structure, and it finished up like this. I would like to point out how all these buildings that I've created, according to Master Sensei Amil and according to Christopher Alexander, is that building is always a repetitive process of a single, it's a single repetitive process. It is like Kung Fu, you practice 1,000 or 5,000 kicks. Fear that person. It's not 100 different things. It is one single action that you are doing, like putting mortar and placing a brick, for example. If you master that one action, you can create a building. So it is about just practicing one single action. A single repetitive action, according to Christopher Alexander, it is very precise, but cannot be clearly defined. You'll read the book to understand this idea. So this is how it is. The whole idea is just like how a ant hill builds an ant hill, bringing a single piece of sand again and again and again and sticks it, or how a dove bird builds its nest. You know how, for example, the oven bird builds its nest. It's a few twigs and mud, go fly, do a single action and bring and assemble it. Or how a bear digs its burrow. You know, it is a single kind of an action. How a woodpecker pecks into the single action. It is a single action to create this kind of a building. And it's very powerful idea, right? Now, this is Casa now mean. Finally, I think I have exceeded my time, but I'm just going to finally come to this idea of intern or apprentice. So this whole idea of being, I started myself as an, please mute yourselves.
Doggy. Doggy, I think.
Please mute yourselves.
Varun, can you quickly close this presentation so that we can just get on to the next one?
Yes. So we have the idea of intern or apprentice. What I thought is that getting in this architectural internship kind of a mode and being an architectural intern was not working for me at all. And over the years, I just understood that it is better to just be an apprentice to craftsmen and to masters around the world. And this is what created this whole idea of handmade architecture and bringing the masters together and working with masters. So I would like to introduce my sensei Amel's work and play a video about him. So we will look at sensei's work. 1 second, pardon.
Vinod, sorry, Varun, is it possible that we do the technique of the flooring and then come back and look at Amil so that we have some continuity on the building thing? Yeah, okay. That would be nice. So you can stop share and then I will just introduce Sundari into it.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you. So that was a great presentation where you saw a journey and a great engagement of traditional architecture. We're getting into life and how we are getting involved and doing things. Now I'm going to introduce our next speaker, Trivandrum Sevvel. I don't even know whether I'm pronouncing it right, but I'll take the advantage of being a moderator and pronouncing it in that manner. She's called TS by her friends, and I call her Sundari. She is an architect, planner, graduated from SRM University. She followed it up at Birmingham University in the UK, and she completed her master's degree in urban and regional planning in France. And she worked on a project with Ministry of Culture with a focus on social and economic development and returned to India back in 2011. She is a storyteller, but an educator too. She runs an architectural consultancy called Studio Conclave and a social initiative called Nammu Veedu, Nammu Uru, Nammu Kadai. Kadai, I think it should be. She curates stories on social issues, documents, and uses traditional techniques in the projects, and works as consultants for NGOs and and she's a material restorer, conservator, and closely working with underprivileged people. Chennai calls her an architect who revived the traditional red oxide flooring. It was quite exciting because I always go back and remember my grandparents' places and the old traditions where we saw a lot of flooring which is only red oxide. And traditionally, they never went back and said that this flooring is not good. In fact, they enjoyed, and we also probably slept on it. I can recollect those days or two. But I think the Sundari will bring a lot of her responses on these red oxide flooring and the techniques that has emerged even today, which continues to be existing, and now she has done it. Primarily, I had asked 2-3 questions, and she'll answer that in her slides. And Sundari, we want it to be a little soon, so it could be a quick one.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
So
Basically,
I have like
yes,
15
I
minutes.
will.
Is that good?
12 is what I would like to.
Perfect.
Red
Yeah.
oxide flooring
On
has
the
been
clock,
vanishing. Yeah, red oxide has been floor has been vanishing from our homes, and now we see a comeback, and soon we see it in your projects. What made you to do that was my first question. Maybe you can answer all that on your slide, so that would be a wiser way. We can save some time so that everybody is really glued on your stuff. What techniques do you adopt to ensure the right kind of finish and the quick 3 points that make it more, make it that you should take care for its construction? The matte versus shine finishes, lime versus cement base and colors, etc. We should also talk about some quick things that you have done. We also have one fear that this is very much artisan based. Do you think that sometime we will lose these artisans and this has to become a manufacturing commodity? Is something which I always wonder and keep it. So over to you, Sundari. You can just share the screen and probably run your story as much as we enjoy the whole thing. Okay?
Definitely, yes.
Thank you.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes. So opening up.
Is it visible? I'll start when it is visible. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you all for being patient, and thank you all for this opportunity. Thank you, CMGBT, for this opportunity, and thanks, Varun. That was a prelude to the many things which we talk about traditional buildings. You gave a very nice brief about what are the different things. So, to answer the first part of the questions, generally when people say you revived the technique, or when they say you kind of got back the technique, all I would say is no, that was not the case at all. What we tried to do was to work with the artisans and to form a collective so that the product, or like in the commercial terms, they call it product, right? So a product, how to make it reach to the new set of audiences and why it went out of practice. So talking about the comeback, the first part of the question, the major reason it went out of practice was, first one, they felt the color. It was, even though oxides can be done in multiple colors, most of the time we associate it with red oxide. So they always say red, black. So that monotony of color, am I audible? Yeah.
If you could, increase your volume a little bit, it'll be better, Sundari.
Now is it fine? Yeah, now is it fine?
I think it's slightly better. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. If this is fine, I can continue. Yeah. So why did it went out of practice, or why was it? So there is this whole cycle. So 70s and 80s, 1970s and 80s, when a lot of mission-made tiles, or the entire set of commercialization, industrialization, the whole cycle which affected so many other handmade industries, or handloom industries, or artisan-based industries. Same way, traditional techniques also went through that cycle of, because you can go to a shop and pick up a tile, but you can't go to a shop to pick up your traditional technique of how this is to be done, or what is the color, or what is the frame. There is no color palette and all this. So that was one point. Second one, people wanted it very quick. They felt 7 days of curing, 14 days of curing, and then polishing. All this was tenuous. And the third complaint, which generally they said was, there is a lot of cracks. There is a lot of water-based problems. And then to answer the first two set of questions, it was more of ease or more of comfort. They couldn't go to a shop and buy a piece because it had to be laid. But the third part of question has a slight sort of problem, because at the end of 1980s and the starting of 90s, the end finish was started to be made in mission polish or mission based polishes. So whenever a mission is set, see, you need a kind of a resting period, curing period, all that is required. So when a mission started coming in, same way, due to the compression and all that, the cracks also started coming in. You don't need compression, you need a setting time. There is a difference. Machine does it quickly, but it doesn't give that resting period or curing period for the material. So I would not say we we kind of brought back the material or and all that. We just felt that a color palette of probably we have tried out around 212 colors for different finishes of oxide, and we made it into a piece, and like in an auto, we just put it like a moving exhibit where people could see, okay, this color, this particular color, this particular shade, and all that. So that is one thing. And when we talk about comeback, also, I feel convincing a client, if that's the first question, when they visit a place which has an oxide flooring, when they visit a place which is traditionally made, and they experience the place, they experience the change of climate, they kind of walk in it, they feel it, the touch and feel of it. I think as humans, this particular sense is very interesting, and when they visit a place, they eventually want to kind of use it. So I wanted to put this particular blue and white because initially when we started, it was a huge problem of mixing, getting the right tone of colors, getting the right tone of combinations, and we were scared to use lighter colors because lighter color mixing should be equal, and then we had to use it commonly in all of the spaces and all that. So that was one aspect of it. So convincing the client to answer it, if you take if they are taken to the site which has an oxide flooring, if they experience it, if they know the essence of it, they will eventually start loving it. And then also we work a lot with children to help them understand better what are the techniques and all that. So once the children are convinced, I think the parents are also convinced. And three things to remember while construction, or to make sure there are flaws. So the maximum complaints, probably I should say three complaints we get is red oxide flooring has a lot of cracks. And then second one is there is chipping. There is difference between cracking and chipping. Chipping means you have small pieces coming out. And the third part is fading. So to answer all the 3 points, the major thing is, like, for example, they say, right, the taste of a food depends on the quality of the water. I think any construction material, for example, even if we take Athangudi tiles, only if it is made in Athangudi, it also has a geographical indicator tag. Only if it is made in Athangudi with that mud in that place with the artisans, it has that particular finish. It has the particular sheen. Same with an oxide flooring. The water quality is very, very important. If you ask for numbers, what is the percentage of water quality it should be? Basically, water which doesn't have any moving impurities or which has high acid content. So these two things. And the third one is sand which doesn't have a lot of large chunks of, so sand should be properly filtered and used. So if proper quality of water and sand is used, we will not have cracks, or we will not have that fading problem also. And the artisan based problem, mostly people say, is if it is manually polished, if this hand laid and manually polished, I've not had problems. If the water qualities and everything is good and manually polished, there won't be any cracks. And once the curing everything is done, then the finish, all the problems which we generally say. So to quickly say 3 points: take care of the water quality. Basically, uh, one site, I think a couple of sites, we had water which was mixed with the sewage. So that was a huge problem which we had. So that is something we have to take care. And matte versus shine. Okay, thank you. Thanks for that pointer. Shine basically is something which is immediate. Sheen is something which ages beautifully. I think any traditional material has that. And then as much as you walk, as much as you explore the space, that kind of gets better. So it can be made with cement. It can be made with lime and mud also. I'm talking about oxide finishes. It depends on where we are using it and all that. So it can be done with lime and mud as well. But like I said, most of the time when we discuss about it, we leave one portion of the like we talk about the clients, we talk about the designers, but mostly we leave the artisans aside. So I think they have been the torchbearers of bringing this or sustaining this for a longer time. So initially, when we were starting up, we started having these workshops where we had a lot of kids coming in to explain the thickness of how it should be, how it should not be, and different patternings of it, and then how it works with light. How it, because I also thought scientific methods of recording all this was required. The how it reacts to different shades of light, how it reacts to different parts of. This was a workshop we had a couple of years back. So basically, if someone is a client or someone wants to get experience with red oxide, how do we do that? So how do we convince them was a question, right? Most of the time when they start using it, when they experience the material with their hands, then they are very excited and they're very happy to do that. And being an artisan oriented art, can you see it getting commercialized? That is one thing. I think I have 2 more minutes. So anything related to artisans have this aspect of like whether we are respecting the art or the artisan. Is the art important or the artisan important? But in terms of construction, uh, they are actually the ones who are always teaching us, who are making us understand it better. So if someone asks me, I think that is one first thing which I spoke with Varun also. We are always happy to call ourselves masons or people who are working under the artisans to understand how that works and to realize it. So it's important to keep so these are the different color combinations with the so this workshop is for potential clients or for people who want to experience it, to understand the difficulties and all that. So we will work out lighter colors, darker colors and all that. So I would like to end it with a point that yes, it is getting commercialized, and I think like the Atamuri tile got GI tag, many other traditional techniques which are very unique to particular zones like finishers and all that, they also need to be done, and that is one facet of traditional building materials and techniques which we needed to finish. And I think that's my 12 minutes. Yeah, thank you.
Uh,
Thank you, Sundari. That was pretty crisp. And I think we got a hang of that. This is not something that cannot be done. It's something which can be done. It's something which can be achieved. And certainly that comes. I know there are a lot of questions that has come back for us on the flooring techniques and the finish component. And there have been a lot of questions that has come on the presentations regarding regarding what Varun has explained. Although we are still due to see Amil's video, I'm just looking at the time, and I'm seeing that I'm past my time of the schedule. So what I will do is that I will run some questions and then probably come back and see the conversation that we had with the master craftsman of Amil with him. So that would enable a good feel when we close the entire webinar. Would that be okay, Neelam? Is that okay? Fine.
yeah, sure. I
Yeah.
think we have
So,
Sundari was speaking on lime
Yes.
plaster.
yes, that was a question that was coming in. So what about the lime? So I thought we'll hear something on lime plasters also from Sundari, because that was one of the questions that's come on very strongly.
Okay. Talking about lime plasters, again, there is this word, right? Labor intensive. So labor intensive. I would like to say that it is time intensive. I think more than the labor intensive part, the time intensive part is what makes a lot of people like ready-made, like getting a powder, getting it done, and then you don't have that patience to work on it. Yes, lime is getting back into the. Should I touch upon the technical part or? Okay, technical part of it. Okay. So whenever there is a finish, whenever there is you can use it on the walls or you can use it in the interior and exterior when we talk about lime. So generally when there is a notion that, okay, you need a particular set of skill set, you need a particular set of, how do I say, expertise to understand whether this particular material is good for this particular location, this geography and all that. So whenever we talk about traditional materials or technique, it is important to talk about context. So lime plaster, most of the time, whether it is hot and arid or hot and humid. For example, if you take Madras, when we had a couple of lime plasters which we were doing, the problems were completely different. But when we were working on a project in Udaipur, the complete set of problems were different. So I think again, the water quality plays a major role. How are we sourcing the lime? Whether the setup of making the lime, the entire process of making the lime. For example, in Chennai, there is a lot of restoration work happening. But I would say that only in a couple of places they've used the traditional method of making the lime in the site, rather than getting the ready-made pack of it and all that. So regarding lime also, like any other traditional materials, the most important part is to understand that it is a breathing material. So it is not that it doesn't have to have a lot of transportation in between. You have to make it inside. I think making insight is the major problem, which a lot of them feel no, it should not be done. Even those who want to do it, they buy the ready-made packets and then they come back after like a year or a couple of years and say there is this chipping, there is this cracking and all that. And again, I'm not going back to the artisan part, but I would like to emphasize that there are certain artisans only who can do color oxides or color line finishes properly. And more than the finishes of the line or the different outcomes of the line, it is important that these techniques from them are recorded and they are kept in the loop. Like there is a complaint that most of them don't give out the, what is that called, equations, or they don't give the proportions, or how do we call that, the basic mixing and all, they don't give out. That's one major complaint, right? But the few artisans which we work, one of them, like I mentioned, is 92 years. The first thing he told in our workshop was he gave the list to all 100 of us. He gave the entire set of numbers. The only thing he said is, whenever you're doing it, please call the artisans. Please call the people in my work. It's a very small village where around 30-40 people work with Lime Plaza. But sadly, we were able to engage them in terms of workshops and different lectures and all that. But to engage them in a project, people have that mindset like it is not a permanent material. Lime finish is not a permanent one. So I think it is to understand the process, the making of the entire setup. There is this sound. Hello?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So making of the line, the entire process, it needs like minimum 5 feet diameter pip, and then also you need in Chennai they actually tried making it with cows recently. I think a couple of years back it came in the papers and all that. But are we using the right materials? Okay, we are using the right technique, but are we using the right material? And I think that also is because there are a lot of these replicas of lime or oxide finishes or Athangudi tiles or anything we call. So in the client point of view or in an architect's point of view also, as someone who's going to enable the use of this material, it is very difficult to find which is the authentic material because we don't have that. So I think on a very larger note, mapping of these practices, mapping of these different artisans and people practicing the right paths, that is more important. So getting back, I don't know if that answered the question. Yeah, so
Yeah, I think one thing which is definitely visible is that both lime and oxide flooring, irrespective any color, they are not a finish that I just buy it off the shelf. I mean, like this certainly, which is something which is integrated at the place where it is getting executed, and it is a lot of it depend upon you and the artisan who is working it. Okay. That's definitely there, and that could be probably going for all the traditional materials and the techniques that is being adopted. I mean, like you as a person are part of this entire process, not standing away and seeing a finished product alone.
Exactly.
Some of the questions that are prompted are that Athangudi tiles, for example, look similar to oxide flooring, and they have a sheen which grows with time. Are they the same? And if they are the same, can it be related to be as a similar as a commercial product of an oxide flooring?
Okay. Okay. Thanks for this question. So interesting question is Athangudi tile is like pieces. You get it in pieces and it is laid. So it is laid and so it is already cured. It is already colored, cured, and then it comes as a product where we lay it in our site. But oxide flooring is like one piece. Like one of my artisans says, I don't know how many of you see Tamil. Tile oru piece, idu mulu piece, which means tile is just one piece. This is like the entire thing is one full piece of tile. So that is one thing which we should. So this is completely like so. Athangudi tile you can get it as a product, but the curing, the color, sorry, not coloring, the design, the coloring, curing is done, and you get it in pieces. And that's a beautiful art. And I would say only if you get it from Athangudi, it is Athangudi type. It also has a geographical indicator mark, which means that it belongs to those. And I think that gives a security to the artisans also, the geographical indicator tag. And it is a piece, it is already cured and all that. But telling you this, the Athangudi tile, when it is laying, that needs the artisans who are involved in that, not anyone who's not experienced, because it is double the size of your normal tile which you get. So that laying needs a certain expertise. So that is one. But if you take oxide flooring, it is laid. So this is like your, for example, if you can decide you have to put an Athangudi tile right after, while you're constructing and your columns are over and that point, you can do it. But you can immediately buy it and do it. But when you have to decide if you're going for an oxide flooring, little bit before during the construction stage itself. And also Athangudi tiles you can lay it once you're painting, your second coat of paint is done, your windows are all fixed, you're ready to move it, you can fix and move in. But red oxide, due to the thickness and laying, timing period, curing and all that, you have to finish it before, after your first coat of paint, and then you do that, then you fix your doors and windows, because the levels are important and all that. So I think those two are two individual beautiful aspects, beautiful techniques. Here it is pre-done. The artisan process is pre-done and you get it like a piece, and you need an expertise to fix it. Oxide is like you fix it with the artisans. I mean, you lay it with, this is more of fixing, this is more of laying. And this comes like a piece. And I think if someone looks at how, and also the connection between these two is the colors, the combination of colors and patterns and all that. Most of the time, if you look at pre-1970s, we can see only plain oxide floorings with color borders. But Athangudi tiles, you can see even a grill pattern being replicated. You can see faces, you can see hands, you can see. I've also seen something with a handprint of artisan. And stenciling is widely used there. Of course, we can use stenciling for oxide also. But this is fixing. The artisan process is done before. Here, it is done on site. So that's the difference. Both are two important traditional techniques. Athangudi is Athangudi only when you get it there. Red oxide is doesn't have its own.
Yes, I understand that, and I think certainly it's a great bridge between getting an artisan at the site to do something, and where there's difficulty to do that, and yet wanted to achieve the traditional finish, you can still do that, subject to an artisan available and helpful to make sure that it is finished appropriately.
Yes,
that was one thing. The second question, which was also related to the flooring, which came up, is that today people are talking about moving away from the modern finished stones and shifting to Athangudi tiles for health, not Athangudi tiles, the oxide flooring on the health benefits. Although it's not the right forum for an answer, just to get a line to it, do you see that as a relevance statement?
We get a lot of inquiries like that. People who have, I don't know if I'm giving the correct medical, arthritis, knee pain and all that, and also people who have flat foot. Flat foot and that particular problem, the doctors suggested them that don't use marble or tile for your thing. Use a natural stone and or any, see, they won't say oxide, they'll say natural stone or natural finish. So the option is Athangudi or oxide flooring. So I have a lot of people coming in, and I think it is basically because, again, this is from my artisan. He said any house which is comfortable for an elder who is above 80 and a child who is below 30 and they don't skid and fall, it's a comfortable flooring. So I think most of our traditional finishes have that, how do I say, that connect, right? So I don't know if that was the part. And I saw this question of, can it be used on the walls? Yes, it can be used on the walls also, the color finishes, but mostly it is, it's a flooring you should feel with your legs. So that is there. Of course, you can do it on the wall for climatic control and all that, but it is more beautiful in the walls. More.
There was another question.
The purpose more.
There was another question. Question, Sundari, that you did tell that you can use two colors in one floor, and obviously it has to be laid separately. So when there are two colors being laid in one room or a border being created of a different color, do you put a spacer in between?
Can I show an image to make it clear? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure. If just that image.
This is like, okay, this is one color. So can you see this is like a floor
Yes.
stenciling?
Okay.
I don't know if that is the right term, but we use that term in my office, floor stenciling. So that part, you do it part by part and then you finish it. See, that's why I said the artisan's thought process is important. They should know where to start, where to finish, where the first part is to be done, which color is to be done, because it is like also dyeing of clothes, right? Whether you do the white first, whether you do the blue first and all that. So that can be done. Sometimes glass can be used or coir coir threads can be used too. I don't personally prefer using brass. Brass is also being used as spacers, but I don't think that works because it reacts with water and then there is some kind of rust which is happening, and then there was a place where I saw someone using brass widely in the corner. It kind of, see, the basic essence of any two material or any two elements naturally is for them to cohesively stick. It is to cohesively work together. So brass kind of breaks that. Glass works, and also sometimes the coir threads works, and sometimes the, I don't know the English name for this, those play things, the goalie balls, the small glass balls. Uh, they play on the streets, the small goalie glass balls.
Kancha. Kancha.
Yes, Kancha.
Marbles.
Thank you, ma'am.
Marbles.
Yes. So sometimes those are used as space breakers too. We may think that they just used it for aesthetics, but when they know that the span is too much, they use that as spaces also. So yeah, that can be used.
Okay, good. That was nice. Thank you, Sundari, for the presentation and the responses.
Okay.
For Varun, there were two questions, although there are many, but I think I'll specify on those two. Varun, you are there?
Yes.
Yes. Was one question which was there, that most of the projects that you had shown are or just one floor or two floors or 2.5 floors. The question which was there, can it be done in 4 or 5 floors, and what specific things should I look for? Obviously, it holds good for a framed structure, but if it was a normal building format using traditional materials only, is there any specific two-liner that you would suggest to make it into a 5-floor building or a 6-story building?
It exists around the world. Specifically, examples in vernacular architecture come from Sana'a or Yemen, Shibam. So 7-floor mud stores, not mud buildings exist. It's just the context is important. Site is important. If it is possible, it has existed before, it can be built.
Right, got it. The other question was, when you're making an arch or a dome, have you put any other reinforcement other than the blocks that we see, adobe blocks that we see?
No, it is without centering, while using just the guides, and more importantly the body and its movements to create a curve. As I said, it is intuitive, so it is not rational also. The curve just comes through the stability of placing these blocks on top of the other. It is just a balancing act, and of course mortar playing its role. So there is no reinforcement
At all. There was one more query which came in just now. How do you integrate these material construction along with, let's say, modern glass and fittings and stuff like that that will go in? Do they do it?
Yes, that has been the challenge all throughout. Frank Lloyd Wright, in creating the Falling Waters, for example, had nice straight steel windows, and he had to butt them against a stone wall. And you can see those details. So, the difference Sundari was also talking about, that natural materials are always flexible, soft, malleable, moldable, rough. They change over time. Whereas rigid materials are going to butt against them or connect with them. So it is about handling that connection. And it is
Right.
not easy. It requires a lot of testing, innovation, experimentation, because the modern building industry is only prescribing rigid versus rigid connections, mostly.
Right. So I think many other questions that we received were not related to the techniques. So I'm holding those questions back so that that can be answered independently by the forum at some point of time. And there were some academic questions, which I guess will hold good when we take it up during an academic session. So that was nice. Do we run the conversation between Varun with his master Amil? So how long will that be? That's around 8 minutes or more?
10 minutes, 8 to 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think we can see that and then probably we'll wrap up the entire session. Will that be good, Neelam?
That is,
Yeah,
that,
yeah, fine.
Yeah, okay.
very
Okay. So
quickly,
we can do a quick one. We can
Yes.
see the master and we
I'm
can
gonna
feel him.
show, I'm going to show him, show a few of his work very quickly,
Yes.
so that you
Yes.
can see whom we are talking about, the sheer mastery of this humble master craftsman. So this is a Moroccan technique called tadela. There are also Italian stuccos. Serofino is what he does. These are all lime finished spaces for very high-end bars to very low-end community buildings. The association with Sensei goes back for a few years, but more importantly, it is this taking his same workshop again and again and being an apprentice with him is just overwhelming because of the knowledge that this is graffiti kind of a technique where you kind of scratch, you create objects with lime. These are the finishes that you can create with lime. So this is the kind of work he does. A simple master plasterer. So we look at his video. I'm going to play his video.
Of course, important to say is, and so my family always thought I'm going to be the first engineer, the first doctor, the first ambassador, the first something important in my family. I mean, grandfather was important man. He was like director of 300 people.
There's a bit of a lag, Varun. If it's okay, I'll play the video.
Effort.
Okay.
Yeah, because the internet is lagging a bit. I've downloaded everything.
I'm stopping my screen share.
Yeah, perfect. I have it open.
Of course, important to say is,
Just a
and
quick
so my
minute.
family always thought I'm going to be the first engineer, the first doctor, the first
Share
ambassador,
screen.
the first something important
Okay, let me.
in my family. Of course, important to say is.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes,
Thanks.
ma'am.
My family always thought I'm going to be the first engineer, the first doctor, the first ambassador, the first something important in my family. I mean, grandfather was important man. He was like a director of a 300 people company in communist times in Yugoslavia, which was an enormous effort. And he did it all with four years of primary school. He was a natural. He was a natural leader, and he was very, very honest and straight with people, and people loved him. And he was a good solution bringer. But so,
like always, isn't it? The ones who have the least formal education are the most educated.
Because they learn very quickly to observe and to assimilate not what is taught to them in the school, but what they need in order to survive and thrive. And so the first one is a passive way of learning, and it's almost a violation sometimes. And the second one is active. It comes out of your own need and curiosity, and that one is a very powerful way of learning. And so what happened to me, I was 17 years old, and my country got hit by the war, and we went through horrific, tremendous changes that I wouldn't recommend anybody, but the result of that was that 2 million people from a 4 million people country had to go out of the country. So I was one of them, and I went to Austria, and my family was already there. About 2 months after that, my dad came to me and said, son, we tried to get you to go on further in the school. I missed 1 year of my, what's it called here, preparatory school in order to get to the college or university.
Suddenly stop
And
the
so I
screen
never
thing here. How do
doubted
we
that I'm not going to go and study. But my dad came to me. It was wartime. He was putting a lot of money into that, into getting people out of the war, helping people, helping family. It was devastating. So he said to me, son, we couldn't get you into school because you're missing that 1 year, and they would just not accept the notes and the efforts of the schools you had from Yugoslavia, the one from Yugoslavia. So we're not going to be able to get you to school. And so you have basically two choices. You're going to start working, or we're going to try to get you to a craft, to learn a craft. I looked at him. I was completely undignified. I was so proud of myself. And I said to him, me working? You kidding me? Well, it took me about 3 days to think what I like. And so, and to realize what craft I really wanted it. And so my criteria as 17 years old was, I like women. I like something beautiful. I like design. And I like chatting. And I got my eureka, and I realized I had to become a hairdresser.
You are. You still are.
So I became I became a hairdresser, and the other very undignified result of that was I was 17 years old, almost 18, and I came from a very good schooling. And I had to go with the 14, 15-year-old girls that had no other option than to go to that school. And so there was another striking, a striking hit into my very ego that happened then. But what happened? Because I want to come back to your question. And this story was important, even though it took a while. I learned to transmit through my hands and through my movements a lot more than just the physical work and a product of that work. I realized that me working with hands was giving me many very, very rich and important benefits. I had the physical benefit of being in movement, and later as a earthen constructor and plasterer and builder, like moving earth and moving shovels and moving materials and mixtures and all of that every day, and applying it in a very correct and repetitive and almost a meditative way, that built my body as much as it had built my spirit. And so there is this societal effect too, and this one is really important. Before I worked and before I started working, I had a very high opinion of myself, and I would see myself as being a person that had to achieve a visionary effect on the world, had to be a kind of a commander, and had to be kind of a philosopher. So a person that's very heady, that's very mental in some way, or that's like moving himself from this realm of heart up. But when I started working, I suddenly had this epiphany about how many things that I use every day are actually made by diligent and very, very disciplined work of billions of people. And I could not anymore disrespect them in my own thinking about the world. Suddenly I had this profound honoring of all the people that are putting so many hours of every day's available hours and energy that Mother Nature, God gave them. And I just couldn't escape anymore from the fact that the world was filled with amazing people.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a societal effect of working with hands. And at the end, the spiritual effect of working with hands, there is a beautiful allegory that comes from Sufi, which is a mystical Islam. And that says, in Turkey, for example, when there are many Sufis and dervishes, the whirling dancers, mystical dancers of Islam, that they said that all these Sufi masters, even though if they are on a very high level of a spiritual attainment and a social acceptance, that he is really a very, very, what you would say in India, a very important guru. These guys would never stop having some kind of craft. So they would work at least a couple of hours a day on producing something with their hands. The reason, there was two reasons why they would do that. One reason is to never let people think that they are in some way better than others. No, which has quite an impact on these postmodern times where we're in, where narcissism and me is so big and amazing. I mean, but this is ancient wisdom. This is something that has worked and that will always work in some way. And the second reason why they had to work was that they understood something of our energetical nature, something of our spiritual nature, that probably great gurus and Ayurveda in India understand. They understood that if you want to be in balance with life and with all your relationships, not only human, also non-human relationships, if you are not transforming this energy that's very prevalent, that's very strong, but that's in some way very cold, and makes distances and makes too many distinctions that get you away from your heart that is able to embrace world. If you work with your hands, a nice part of that coldish energy goes down into your hands, already being touched by your heart. And so your hands warm up, and suddenly you have balance. So you understand the vision, you understand the body, you understand the other person, and you understand the product. So there's balance. So that's why it's important to work with hands. Even though if you're an architect or any other kind of a person that's more bound to computer or to very, you could say, mental, rational jobs, I would always advise have an hour or two a day working with your hands. Washing dishes is not a bad thing, okay? Because there are many ways to wash the dishes. So there's a good way to wash the dishes, and there's not that good way to wash the dishes. But that's another workshop. I mean, I would spend one day at least. One day.
Oh, okay, I think we lost. Okay, no problem. We got a hang of what Amil wanted to express and where did it come from and how his expressions were coming in from his childhood and how his background could help him to really develop a fine piece of art, and he shared it with lot of his people across the world. And Varun is probably one of them who really enjoyed a part of it and learned really some traits about it. It was nice. It was a pleasure listening to Amil. And thank you, Varun, to organize that at a very short notice. That was very beautiful. And thank you, Sundari, to have shared a great thing. It was a pleasure to have you both live and Amil's conversation on a recorded format in the entire webinar. And I'm sure we are just one of the class on the series that is happening. People who are following us and repeating will probably enjoy and probably learn a lot of other things as we go along on various factors of sustainability and traditional architecture. Over to Neelam.
Yeah, thank you, DK. And I think it was really unfortunate that that video somehow some technical glitch. We will share the video with all the viewers. I mean, through mail, so that they can actually get the whole point what Emil was actually trying to say. It was really profound, and I really thank Varun for bringing that. So I think it has been a great session. I'll be also very quick. I think we are running out of time, so but I'll be very quick. And in this time of mechanization and 3D printed houses being lauded for being the need of the day, these age-old.
Yeah, 2 minutes.
I don't know why my video is not coming in the center, so I do not know what is the problem.
We can hear you, Neelam. You can just continue. That should be good. We can see you.
Okay, fine. Fine. Yeah. So I think every day we keep hearing about this whole construction being done in a day, and then we have 3D printed houses, being done. So how do you actually talk about these kind of techniques in a time like this today? But and these age-old techniques may seem very irrelevant, but I just want you people to pause for a moment and flip the whole scenario. And what I mean to say is the urbanization, the statistics that by 2030 we will be, so many people will be staying in the cities, and how are going to do it, and these materials will not work, and these techniques will not work. Let's just flip that. Let's de-urbanize from now onwards. Let's just think in the opposite direction. Let's think about the millions of unemployed youth as a resource and not a burden. So in that scenario, do we really need, and do you think it is fair to have mechanization of buildings? What do you see in the future? And what would you prefer in your heart of heart? Now, thanks to Corona, people are able to work from home. So they can be in a village, they can be in a suburban areas and live a much better life, quality of life, rather than living in pigeonholes in the city. What do you see? I leave it to all of you for introspection. All the speakers today have taken uncharted paths and are trying to bring dignity to the traditional techniques of construction, methodologies, etc., by mainstreaming them in the construction industry, trying to mainstream, I would say. And I think it's a very brave step. And kudos to you all, Varun and Sundari and Emil. I think that was really, really great for sharing your works and your most valuable experience. It was truly inspirational. Jalbagh Educational Institute, a 100-year-old institute, which is our hosting partners and also the institutional partners for this series of webinars on traditional constructions and materials. It is located in Agra. It's a 100-year-old institute. And the mission objective of DEI is to provide value-based, comprehensive, and interdisciplinary education to evolve a complete person. The architecture department of DEI was started 5 years ago and has been attracting very talented students from all over the country. The department emphasizes on sustainable development at the core of architectural education, embracing the winds of change under the able guidance of architect Molly Caprihan. who is heading a department. Service to humanity through profession and working with hand and communities is imbibed deeply into the students as a core requirement. I thank Professor Dr. Prem Kalra, Director DEI, Dehradun Education Institute,
Have any wine?
and Architect Molly Caprihan and Architect Piyush of Department of Architecture for partnering as our institutional partners and co-hosting the session. Thank you so much. I thank Professor Anand DK for moderating the session very sensitively and in a balanced manner. Thank you, Anand.
Thank you.
Our sessions are to bring information to you, the common man, in the most simple manner, so that you can understand that all the things that we are talking about in our webinars from the beginning are doable. And that has been our emphasis, because we all feel that this corona and this global warming and this pandemics, we cannot do anything. The government has to do, the civil organization has to do, and someone else has to do. It's too difficult a task, it's too complex. As Varun showed you, and as Sundari showed you, as all these people showed you, and Amil talked about it, it is really possible. I heartily thank all of you for actively participating in the webinar. I think we had close to over 500 registrations, very enthusiastic participants. Do sign the attendance and leave your feedback. Our next webinar is on building with natural materials, and that is with Professor Jaisim, Architect Dean De Cruz from Goa, and Architect Sandeep Virmani of Hunarshala fame. See you again soon. Stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think Piyush will wait for a few minutes.
Yeah.
And, because people are signing attendance. So once everyone logs off, we will end the session, Piyush.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you. But I think, ma'am, you can leave, Neelam, ma'am. We will stay.
I would have liked to see Piyush also for a moment on the screen.
Piyush, can you switch on your video?
Yes, ma'am.
Thanks for all your help, Piyush. It was a very good.
It was really, really very nice. Really very nice. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
ma'am.
You did a very great job. Thanks.